Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn with the founder of the Four Horsemen, the Hall of Famer himself, Double A, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Still healthy. Everybody I know, and I'm thanking God for that, is still healthy, and everybody's kind of towing the line and kind of earning that being healthy. I think if you do all the things that you're asked and you stay home and you do the social distancing and all that, and you're eating healthy and still managing to get a workout somehow, and if you do all that stuff, you're going to stay healthy. So guys, or everybody out there, please do everything you can do to keep you and everybody you know healthy, and we're maybe turning the curve at some point.
Well, we're certainly turning a curve here on the show. Fans are really digging our format where every other week we give them the keys to the show and say, hey, what do you want to talk about? And today's no different. It's another hashtag Ask Arn Anything. And if you want to participate in one of these shows, it's simple. Just follow us on Twitter at The Arn Show and just look for something pinned near the top. Very recently we posted, it's your favorite time of the week. It's time to hashtag Ask Arn. Leave your questions here. And we got hundreds of responses. There's no way we can get through them all, but we'll try to hit the high points today. Arn, are you ready?
You bet.
Steve Kaufman wants to know, is Arn a home gym guy? And if not, how has he been dealing with COVID-19 closing all the gyms?
It has been very, very tough. When they close the gym on you, you know, and you're used to going 4 or 5, sometimes 6 days a week, it's tough. I lucked out. There will be no disclosure of where, but I located a gym that I was available to use and was one of only a couple of people that was able to use it. So I've been able to train the entire time. And it being an empty building, still observing all the rules and everything. And it was a fortunate find, and I am so thankful it saved my life through all this. And I don't have a home gym, don't have the room for it. I don't know if I would have ever looked at that as being a necessity, because good God, who knew this was coming? But I did have access, and I do have access to a gym. I'm very, very thankful. A very small one, but it's not like I'm training for the Olympia either. So
Michael Eldridge writes, pick your poison, Arn. Be pinned by one of the ding-dongs in a tag match or perform the role of the Shockmaster during his debut.
I could have pulled the Shockmaster thing off. I'm sure I have many times and just don't recall it. That's an interesting question. You know, now that I see that the Shockmaster deal has been embraced,
yep,
it has turned into an iconic moment. It went from one of those mistakes that we all make at some point during our career, and it has turned into one of the high spots, and it's a positive moment, I think. And you go back and laugh at it, and That's cool. I think I could pull that one off.
It is fun that people, they went from being so serious about it to understanding, hey man, shit happens and let's poke fun at it and have a little fun. And Mr. Ottman, he's embraced it and he's doubled down on it. And I think you gotta be a good sport about things like that. I mean, this is all supposed to be fun, right?
Absolutely. And hey, we all do stupid stuff. I go back and watch old tapes of, you know, not even the beginning of my career, the end of my career. We all make stupid mistakes during matches and during promos, and you mess up on the verbiage, or you say the wrong thing, or it's in the wrong tense, or all that. We all do that. So as long as you don't make too much out of any one single event and just take it in stride and move on, it is what it is, and nobody's perfect.
Here's an interesting question. One we haven't talked about from a more modern WWE. James Shea writes in, what is or was your opinion of Enzo? And do you think he still has a place in the business?
Well, God, I'm certainly not the kind of guy that can say this guy doesn't belong in the business unless you've really, really went out of bounds with something. Nobody died and left me God, and, let me make those decisions. Enzo was a guy that put a long time in down at NXT and with his partner, Big Cass, and they had a pretty shtick going down there. Once they came up to the main roster, though, you go into a whole different learning phase, or you're supposed to. If you're going to be hanging around, you're going to go through a whole new, let's start over. Here's the way we do things on Raw. Here's the way we do things on SmackDown. You can't be too hard-headed about that because there are people trying to help you. And if you don't listen to those people and you fail, then it's on you. If you do listen to those people and do everything that you can possibly do to pull off what they're telling you to pull off, then you got a shot at it. And I just think Enzo might have been a little bit too headstrong about how he felt things should go. And, only time will tell. Who knows when he'll pop back up somewhere.
Allegedly, and of course I know that you weren't there for any of this, but allegedly he rubbed some of his coworkers the wrong way. And there's been reports that maybe there was an incident with him and some other talents on a bus once upon a time, maybe. Do you recall there being some quote unquote heat on Enzo from some of his WWE brethren?
Well, I mean, rumblings, of course, guys are always, not getting along and trying to sabotage each other and all kind of things. And then there are a lot of times that a guy will just be doing stuff in the confines of the locker room or during a match or on a road trip or in an airport or wherever it may be that you hear about secondhand. And, if it's personal stuff, I just let it go by. If it's business related and you start to hear disturbing things and come from more than one source, sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire.
Do you think we'll see him again? I mean, it feels like for whatever reason, he may have burned a bridge with WWE. And I think there's folks within AEW who have sort of made it clear that he's not going to be welcome there, because it feels like if he was going to, then maybe it would have already happened. It feels like they did a little stop and start and maybe shot themselves in the foot with him in Ring of Honor. You start to wonder what's left. Do you think there's a chance we see him pop up somewhere? And if so, where do you think it would be? I mean, it doesn't feel like it's that likely that it would be New Japan and perhaps the NWA, but I don't know if that's exactly what he's looking for. And if you're sort of running through everywhere, it feels like Impact, maybe by process of elimination. What say you?
Well, never say never in this business.
Right.
If you're a fool, if you say, oh, they'll never work in this business again. Well, they won't until they need you, until the company has a place for you and you're the one that would fit in that spot. And they're really not concerned about what you've done in the past or what your reputation is. If there's a need to be filled and he's the guy to fill it, then he may get another crack at it. Who knows? I can't look at the different companies and just say, oh, there's a perfect fit, right, because I'm not that familiar with them, to be honest with you.
Sure. Well, go ahead.
Sorry. I just, I would just say that I would be very careful, even though the business went through through the last year. I say it's a resurgence
Yeah,
of the pro wrestling. Would you agree?
I would.
And now it's like we get slapped down by this tragedy, and we're going to have to start all over again. And that means everybody's got to get on board. And number one, do what is going to strengthen your company, protect your company at all costs, because if these places go under, any one wrestling organization that has started to catch fire over the last year, if it goes under, that's a lot of jobs. And
Yeah.
we certainly don't want to see anybody else lose their job.
Let's talk about Alex Wright. Josh Kuhn says, what are your thoughts on working with Alex Wright? And this has been an interesting topic over the years, because we've heard that he was maybe supposed to be one of the next big things. And then he had a bit of a health situation and gets repackaged and comes back. But his legend has almost grown because he sort of stayed away from the American wrestling scene, but apparently still doing his thing over in Europe. What'd you think of working with Alex?
I thought Alex was a good worker, to be honest with you. He was young, kid was athletic, and, he had kind of grown up in the business, and he came to us with a little bit of that European flavor. I don't know about the dancing thing. Now, you put yourself inside my head back in that moment in time. I wasn't quite as liberal in my thoughts as I am today, because it was a different business.
Right.
But wrestling, bell to bell, I enjoyed working with Alex, and I worked with him a lot of times. And he was a young guy, and he was gun ho, and he was willing to do whatever you wanted. And I enjoyed working with him.
So you had a problem with the dancing at the time? You felt like it was making a mockery of the business, maybe?
I just think it was just silly. It was, for a baby face, was god awful. I mean, it wasn't like it was even good.
Right.
I mean, there have been guys in the past that have danced and different things, and spun up on their head and did all the, but it was good stuff. It wasn't, this thing with Alex was just like, it was cheesy, I thought. And I don't know if it was meant to be cheesy, but it was cheesy. And I just never could get used to that being a preamble to what I was going to have as a serious match to follow. I hoped, anyway.
No, I get that. It makes sense. Here's an interesting one that we haven't talked about before, you and I. Mike Eldridge wants to know, what did Arn think of the Hog Wild / Road Wild pay-per-views? Of course, this was an outdoor concept happening in Sturgis, North Dakota. It's a biker rally. There are no tickets sold. There's no seating in the crowd. It's just guys surrounding the ring and oftentimes just standing over their bikes and revving their engines. And I don't know, it's a unique environment. What'd you think of the conditions and the environment as one of the guys in the ring?
It was difficult, to be honest with you. We were all out in trailers, but these were not air-conditioned trailers for the most part. One or two were, and the brass had those. So you had outdoor facilities for the restrooms, which was for the guys and the girls. I felt really terrible for the women having to use an outside porta potty. The hotels in the area were, sold out way in advance. So you had guys scattered around at different hotels and things of that nature. It was dirt floors backstage everywhere. So everywhere you went, you were tracking mud and dirt, and everywhere you went, it was hard to keep the ring clean. As you can imagine, a guy on his trip would pick up dirt if he didn't clean his boots, before he stepped through the ropes. Now you're tracking dirt in there. It was notoriously hot. I mean, just brutal hot. And I'm kind of spoiled. I like to have a clean hotel room. Doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, but I like it to be clean. I like to be able to walk around without having to have my socks on. And there were they were just fair hotels, the accommodations, because there weren't any more hotels. We're just so. And I just felt like once you got in the ring and started your match, you weren't going to get a true wrestling reaction.
Right.
You know, you got a bunch of bikers,
Right.
and they're going to cheer and boo what they want. And at the inopportune time, if that's, you know, that's what they want to do, what are you going to do? Wade out in the middle of them and go, hey, you're not reacting right, fellas. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, technically it was, and logistically it was a little tough to produce. It really was. And, you know, I'm not real high on non-money making projects. I just think somewhere down the road, you have to turn around and make up for those losses. Maybe not immediately, but that's none of my business.
Josh Kuhn wants to know if you have any good Roddy Piper stories.
Again, Piper was a guy that I didn't spend any downtime with. I was a huge fan, as you will find a lot of wrestlers are fans of Roddy Piper and what he brought to the table. Certainly he was a generation before me, or a half a generation, however you want to look at it. But he was just so talented and so good on the stick. And that's one of those things I aspired to do well, was to be able to communicate with the audience and put out whatever I wanted to put out, negative, positive, vibe, tell a story, go back and recap a story from last week, or make a prediction about a story coming forward. And I would just watch Piper and marvel at how good he was. And he paid a lot of dues to get where he was in the business. And he was just one of those really, really huge superstars, like a wrestler's wrestler, as far as just being so well-rounded and really a superstar in the business. I miss him. That's for sure. I miss getting to watch him perform.
I'm really fascinated to hear you talk about Roddy Piper as being somebody so influential to you and your style, because his promo style and your style, I don't see a whole lot in common. It feels like some of his were so over the top and at times even nonsensical, but it worked because it was him for some reason. Like, I don't know that anybody else could have said the same words he did and it worked as well. It wasn't necessarily what he said, but how he said it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Don't misunderstand me. I wasn't saying that I tried to pattern myself after him and do anything that he did in the ring, on the mic. Otherwise, tried to emulate him in any fashion. I was just so amazed that he was so in touch with that character and so in tune and was so comfortable with who he was and could pull off what he was trying to convey in his own way. And he was so original. It was more me just knowing this guy knows who he is. He's got a grasp of who he is. And if today he's going to be nuts, that's the Piper you get today, the one that's nuts. And if he's dead serious next week, that's the one you get, and you believe all that. And that was more of where I was pointing on the far as emulating Piper.
Pinder J wants to know, Arn, what's the most scathing promo you ever cut on Rick or Tully? And I'm sure he means in real life. Did you guys ever have a moment where you really blew your stack at one of those guys?
Oh, I'm sure we all did. I'm sure we all, bit each other's heads off because we were all together and, too much of the time.
Right.
But whatever it was, it would have been short-lived. Probably didn't last over a day. Probably was about something that didn't matter. And we were pretty close during those days. We were, because it was kind of us against the world.
Right.
There was some animosity in that locker room, if you could imagine, the way egos are and the way they should be. And there was some jealousy, and there was all kind of things going on. So we kind of knew that we had to, watch each other's backs and work together for the good of the company. We're all pulling the wagon the same direction. So if anything that we got into, it was more ribbon on the square. If we were, You know, I used to rib the guys all the time, and they would rib me back. And it was, you know, it was just, it's probably some of it started out good naturedly. I don't think we had very many, if any, business arguments that would have been because we saw things all differently. I don't recall anything like that.
Let's pivot to more recent WWE. Mike Whitaker wants to know, was it ever discussed to have you as an on-air character in WWE? And of course, he's not talking about back in the day. He means your most recent agenting run. You were there a long time. You've talked to us a little bit before about how, you know, they tried you at commentary and that lasted, I think, exactly one show. What can you tell us about any sort of discussions one way or another about you being a more regular on-air character?
Well, I did a few things scattered here and there. The Undertaker thing was the most prominent, probably, of my career. That short little interaction that I had as part of him and Rick's match at WrestleMania. And there was a few things, you know, we did the deal with the Nexus when the legends were all out there, and we got the shit kicked out of us by the Nexus guys, which I think resulted in Steamboat legitimately getting hurt. There was a few things over the years that I would pop up, like towards the end, the last couple of years, I did a little something backstage with, let me get this right, I want to say it was the Ascension and Fandango, and what was Fandango's partner's name? Breeze?
Yeah, Tyler Breeze, yeah.
Tyler Breeze, and I apologize to him for his name not being in the forefront, but we did a little backstage thing a week or two with those guys that was entertaining. But there was never any talk of me being a ongoing character on the show.
Here's a fun question for us, and I can't believe this is actually a thing, but it is, and occasionally it'll make the news. Mick Dolman wants to know, what are Arn's thoughts on being able to place bets on pro wrestling, and what might the reaction have been if it was suggested 30 years ago? So I don't know that you've seen this, Arn, but especially when it comes to pay-per-views and the like, there are certain websites that would actually take your betting action on who you think's going to win. And Dave Meltzer would often report whenever there was a major swing, because it would feel like perhaps someone within the company who knew what the finish was would lay a significant enough bet that it would adjust all of the lines accordingly. But the very idea that we're betting on something scripted on a sporting website feels a little weird. What say you?
You're kidding me, right?
No, it's real life, man. You can bet on pay-per-views.
Stop it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this, but oh, I wished this would have been going on back when I had some inside knowledge.
Well, you know what I should have done a few years ago? I should have sent you a text. Hey pal, want to make some money? You like Sasha tonight? Just thumbs up, thumbs down.
Boy, you shit the bed. What were you thinking? You and I, not only with all your accrued wealth so far, I would be having some of that right now.
Oh,
God
whatever.
Almighty. I swear, this is the first I've ever heard of that, but, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say.
Ricky Morton's mullet wants to know, when out with the boys, what's the protocol on who picks up the check?
We're talking just going out to dinner or whatever it is.
Yeah, like let's pretend, and we know that allegedly back in the day, Flair picked up the tab most of the time, but let's say that you're in a territory and Flair's not there. This is maybe pre-Horsemen, and it's you and Bullet Bob and I don't know, Matt Bourne, whoever. And you guys go to the bar and everybody's having drinks, and then the tab comes. What happens now?
Well, my experience with that is you have separate checks, because guys are going to leave when they're ready. Notoriously, Guys are going to get out of there, and it hits them at that exact moment, and I'm ready to go. And before you can start unraveling one central check, it's just easier to have separate checks and let the guy know when you get in there, because some guys are going to stop and have one drink as they're ordering some food to go.
Right.
Some guys are just going to go in there and have 10 drinks, not get any food, and everything in between. It's so my experience was you just have your own separate check, and that made sure nobody tried to get over on anybody else. Anybody got screwed along the way. None of the people working in the restaurant got the shaft. Separate checks. Go ahead and give them your credit card when you first walk in and go, hey, just keep this open. But I'm the only one ordering off of it. That's the way you prevented things getting a little shady.
Yeah, I can see how that could be something that could get a little hairy. Another question here. Any good stories about the Iron Sheik? He's become a bit of a cult figure. He had a run, I don't know, a decade or so ago on the Howard Stern show, and he became, a comedy figure. I mean, he even did some stand-up comedy shows, but once upon a time, I mean, he was a legit badass and a former world champion. What do you remember about working with the Iron Sheik?
I was just laughing my ass off when you mentioned his name kind of under my breath a while ago, and not in a negative way. Every time I see him, he is such a gimmick. I just bust out laughing. I mean, on sight. And he was a badass amateur wrestler. I will get some of this story a little jumbled up, but I will tell you one that is absolutely hilarious. When I first met Sheik is when I first went to Atlanta after I'd been with Bill Watts and Matt Bourne, myself, Paul Ellering. We got to Atlanta and Sheik rode with us a few times. And it was my first dealing with the Sheik. So there's four of us. We're going down the road, and I'm sitting in the back seat. I'm the rookie, and Sheik is beside me. And let's just say he had a little puff of the ganja.
Sure.
Which made him feel big, feel huge, or I am a big man. He felt like his chest was like it grew 10 inches in his mind. And the way he was sticking it out, I couldn't argue with him. So, Arnold, you are Ollie Anderson's cousin. That's correct. I said, yes, Sheik, it is. Or he is the boss man. He is cheap shot. He thinks he can stretch the Sheik. I don't care if he is the boss. I'll stretch him. I'll stretch his no good ass. I said, well, okay. All right. I understand, Kaz, that you were, amateur. Oh, yes. I was Olympic champion back in 1968 Olympics. I stretch everyone. I am still shooter today. I make everyone humble. I said, okay, you were in the 68 Olympics, and I started doing the math. I said, if you don't mind me asking, Sheik, this math that you just gave me that I just kind of told out, you would have won the Olympics at like 14 years old. That's amazing. Oh, yes, I can't believe it. Now I'm rolling. I'm absolutely rolling because I know that he is ribbing me.
Sure.
But he's not ribbing me.
He doesn't believe. Yeah. He believes it.
He wants me to believe it, and he believes it.
Yeah.
But the math is so screwy and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, I just busted out laughing. And then he started out laughing. Thank God he wasn't offended. Because it was the craziest story that I'd ever heard. But over the years, I mean, every time I see him, I go hug his neck, shake his hand. To me, he is a walking comedy act, but without not making fun of him.
Right.
Just laughing at the gimmick because he is so into his gimmick.
One of the best. Thank you very much, Ricky Morton's mullet, for having Arn breaking out his Iron Sheik impression that we didn't know he could do. One last question from Ricky. He wants to know, did you ever see Alabama Doink? Let me give you the backstory here, Arn. There was a rather plump individual who wrestled in a full Doink gimmick that looks like a Walmart special. And he had a match several years ago against Heidenreich in the parking lot of a Golden Corral, where they destroyed an old beat up car and threw each other in the bushes. And it is exactly what you would expect based on the way I described it. But we recently lost Alabama Doink. May he rest in peace. But he's become an internet legend that it was so bad, it was great. Did you ever see any Alabama Doink?
No. Do we know the name of the gentleman behind the mask?
He was an indie guy. It wouldn't have been a name that you and I would probably know, but the next time you're in Huntsville, I'm going to break out some Alabama Doink for you. I think it's going to be right up your alley.
Deal. And I would say this, and this is, most people won't expect that coming from me, but if anybody, male or female, is able to go out and even have one match at something they have lived their entire life aspiring to do, wanting to be in the professional wrestling business, if they get one chance at doing that, and they're truly a fan, someone dedicated to the business, if they get one crack at it in a Golden Corral parking lot, in a sewer drain, on top of a building, in someone's shed, ask them, was that fun? And when you look in their eyes, you'll see the same thing from everybody. Not that it was great, not that it did anything for the business, but it let them live their dream, if only for a brief time. And how can that be wrong?
Let's move along and talk about another story that was recently discussed on Jim Cornette's podcast. Someone asked about ribs, where it was a joke to have someone arrested. And he says, once upon a time, the guys ribbed you and you were quote unquote arrested. And I think a lot of this became part of the internet conversation because a famous story was told on the WWE Network where Vince McMahon had Jonathan Coachman arrested for illegal gambling. Of course, it was just a big game, and then eventually they let him go and no big deal. But a generation before that, Courtney says, you got arrested.
My first Charlotte, North Carolina house show, I hadn't been there any time. I don't know, but I mean, just, it could have been a week, could have been 4 days, but it was the first Charlotte Coliseum. I had just left Pensacola. I had worked a substantial, what am I looking for here? I gave them my notice. Okay. I worked a couple of week notice, which is what any promoter would ask. So I left the right way. I got a nice payoff on the way out. Thank you, Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, the whole bunch, Bullet Bob Armstrong, everyone that was an owner, Jimmy Golden. Thank you for that. It was the biggest week I had in the business. So I get to Charlotte. I'm ready to rock and roll. And I'm sitting in the locker room, and all of a sudden, 2 cops walk in. And Jimmy Crockett is in, because we are in Charlotte, he's in the locker room, and they go over to say something to Jimmy, and I'm looking at him, and I just know that anytime police officers come in and ask for the boss,
it ain't good.
It ain't good. No. So I'm sitting there lacing my boots up, and I just kind of look down. I'm just trying to become invisible just because it's going to be uncomfortable for whoever and whatever this situation is. It just ain't going to be good, like you said. And 2 police officers come over to me, and they go, your name is Martin Lundy? I said, yes, sir, it is. Were you in Dothan, Alabama and gave a date? And now I'm trying to think. I don't even know what that day that was.
Right.
You know how the business is.
Sure.
And I'm thinking back, and I'm going, I'm not sure. Well, we're sure. We have a warrant here for your arrest.
Oh.
Well, then Jimmy Crockett walks over. He goes, guys, what's the problem here? Mr. Crockett, you need to stay out of this. We have a warrant for this gentleman's arrest. He will be taken to Dothan, Alabama, when they can come get him, but we're going to have to hold him here for extradition. And he goes, guys, we can take care of this. This is Jimmy now. We can handle this some other way. No, sir, we can't. So he will be held for extradition. Well, Jimmy looks at me and he looks at them, and now I'm shaking. Oh, like, Jesus, guys. They got the paperwork in their hands, the whole thing. They go, so they cuff me. And Jimmy, who I'm waiting to say, Arn, I'll be down there to get you, man. I'll be down to bail you out. I'll be there in a minute. He goes, well, take him out the back door. Don't take him through the crowd. Think about that minute for a moment. You talking about cold-blooded.
Yeah. Your
last hope just said, take him out the back.
Yeah, don't mess with my business. See you later.
Yeah, if this is going to stick, sorry. Been nice, Arn. Been 5 days. See ya. Man, I'm walking out the back door. Now, I'm cuffed. I mean, I got on 2 wrestling boots that aren't laced. T-shirt, short wrestling tights, knee pads. I'm walking out the back door, and my legs are so weak, I'm almost falling down. I'm thinking, good God almighty, what in the hell? And I'm telling you, it's pure terror. That's pure terror. And I go out, they put me in the police car, and I'm sitting there, and I'm going, Jesus, I got to get a hold of my fiance. And I'm the 1,000 things. How do I get a hold of Aaron? I don't know anybody here in town. I just got here. All these things are going through your mind, and all of a sudden, I hear that laugh. It's Rick. Laughing his ass off with that big nose of his pressed against the window. Jerks the door open, goes, we got you. So he set it up. They arranged it, and it was just so happens, which I didn't know at the time, Doug Dillinger, who did security for Crockett all the time and was a Charlotte police officer, and one of his friends pulled this thing off. And man, I could barely get out of the back seat. My legs were so weak, and it was a ritual and a welcome. You're part of the crew. Da 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 da. Man, you're talking about a bad rib. That's a bad rib.
Or a hilarious one, depending on if you were in the cop car or not. I mean, if you're on the outside, it's probably one of the more hysterical things. But yeah, that day you were probably glad to be wearing black tights.
I can appreciate, yes, both sides of it.
Big Red 603 wants to know, Double A, you always carry yourself with such humility and grace, but for this question, please set that aside. When did you realize that you were over, that you were a draw, that you were a main event player? Is there a specific match, angle, or year you can point to and say, man, that's when I really felt it?
I don't know that you have a feeling of, okay, I'm over. I guess you get to a point where you start feeling like I can control the audience. I think right before I left Pensacola, I will just say this, and I did feel this, because every single week I got to do all those market spec promos and get them right. And I got to do them for a solid year, and I got to develop who I was. I got to develop my ring skills so that I could go out and have a match with virtually anybody and it be passable. I felt like, and, I had my, I guess, gimmick, being an Anderson and wrestling that style. I had everything pretty much lined up to where I felt confident that I could go out and be put in a main event position because I'd worked main events and, for a solid year with those guys. And they had trusted me, and I got to work with all their top baby faces that came in and all those things. So I felt very confident at that point leaving and walking in the door with Jim Crockett for my first television. I felt like I had my shit together, and I felt like they could put me out there with whatever talent they chose, and I would be comfortable with that, and I could add to what the card was that night. And I felt like I was in a position to get over. And his famous words to me, Dusty Rhodes, when I walked in and met with him in the office, as he just cocked back and put his boots up, never forget it, looked at me and just said, "Go get over." Sat there for a minute, and he said, "That's all." And I walked out, and I knew exactly what he meant. And that's what I tried to do. And I think, obviously, the success I was a part of with Jim Crockett Promotions, I was in a position to get myself over, and I think I did.
I think we would agree. Adam wants to know, what is Arn's opinion of Barry Darsow saying that Tully injured him on purpose with the chair shot when the Brainbusters won the belts from Demolition? I have to admit, Arn, I don't remember hearing that, but I haven't seen a lot of Barry Darsow interviews. I know he's done a couple of shoot interviews and the like, but I don't remember catching any. Did you ever hear this story that maybe Barry was upset with Tully based on a chair shot?
Well, the chair shot to switch the titles. When Andre came down, slid the chair in, he did potato him. Yes, I do know that. And he might have given him a slight concussion, but I know he didn't try to hurt him on purpose. I would bet my life on that. That's just not the way we operated or thought about. Now, again, I try to tell people all the time, no matter what you think about the business, you hit a guy with a steel chair in the head, it's a steel chair in the head. And the way it was, Barry was covering me. Tully slid in, and there was nowhere for his head to go. He hit him in the back of the head, and it was a potato. But it was not him being reckless. It's just, it is what it is. Steel chairs hurt, folks. Make no mistake. And there's been a lot of concussions that just got swept under the rug, not intentionally, but I mean, when someone would be out and be hurt, and, you would just say, okay, they've been hurt. They're going to be out 2 weeks or 3 weeks. A lot of those come from chair shots back in the day. And I would almost guarantee Barry Darsow's a good friend of mine to this day. Tully did not hurt him intentionally. Did he hurt him with the chair? Yes, he did.
Let's lighten the mood a little bit. Jonathan wants to know, chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, or chicken strips? What do you prefer? And do you have a go-to dipping sauce?
Probably be chicken tenders, honey mustard.
I think we're on the same page there. Another interesting question, and this is one that I know we're getting because you and I have recently talked about how much we enjoyed Nikki Bella's work. And I'm really surprised that that hasn't gotten more hate tweets towards us yet. But please direct them to me. Hey, it's Conrad. I thought she was great. And I know that the internet at the time was just sort of sour on it, but I think some of that is, tinfoil hat business. Jonathan writes, if Nikki Bella wasn't involved with John Cena, do you think she would have been the Divas champ as long as she was?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, who's to say? I just think for their time, if you go back and look at the ladies that were on the roster and what time period it was and the uniqueness of them being twins, and if you go back and watch some of their matches, they were good together. Yep. Brie and Nikki, and it's not me making a personal observation or anything to do with John, because we had no crossover, business whatsoever. Just because I had all of John's matches did not mean that I had anything to do with Brie and Nikki. I mean, they had their own producer, which was usually Fit Finley. But, I don't know how much politics plays into title runs. I don't think as much as people would think. I really don't. I just knew that the Bellas worked well together and they worked well with the other ladies. And, I just base my opinion off of what I see. And you got to look at the era and the time frame and, how much time do they have in an individual match and what magic were they trying to pull off in a short time, or did they have too much time? There's so many variables you have to look at before you gauge a certain match. What is their story going in? What's going to be the story coming out? They're all variables, and they're all very important on how someone's performance is portrayed.
Fun question here based on some of our show reviews we've done. This one's from Big Extra. He says, Arn, you've talked about Dolph Ziggler on a previous episode. I feel like he could be the next Cody Rhodes, meaning a guy that bets on himself and hits it big. Do you see him ever leaving WWE at any point, or at this point, is he a lifer with the company?
Well, only Dolph could tell you that. I don't know. I really don't know. I just know that every time I worked with Dolph, Dolph had an opinion. And if you don't have an opinion in this business, it means you're really not thinking about what your job is that day, probably deep enough, because if you're not talking about it, you don't have an opinion about whatever you're going to do on TV that day. To me, it tells me you're really not that concerned. He always had an opinion and he always had a slant. And, some of those times, those slants were not what was being sent down from creative. And, the fact that Dolph has always taken pride in every match he's been in, that's the one thing no one will be able to say that he went out and he tanked one on purpose. No. or he loafed.
Never.
And I respect that because, you get faced with a lot of situations that really don't do anything for you during the match, don't really do anything for the company, but you go out and you give it your best because it's not about any of that. It's about giving the fans a product that they're glad they paid their money to see. It's purely and simple. That's the first thing that you should do as a performer is make sure that audience gets the very best of you that particular day. And, whether Dolph moves on or if he ends his career up there, that's certainly up to him. I just know that he's a professional, and that's the dealings I had with him, and that's my opinion.
D-Ray has an old school question. He says, can we have detail on when a fan rushed the Horsemen in Richmond? You got him in a headlock and by the nose, and then JJ kicked the guy in the face and accidentally broke your fingers.
That never happened.
Alrighty. Rajiv wants to know, when Arn wants to go looking for some good eating, where's he looking to go? And I'm sure he's talking about in your stomping grounds these days in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Where am I looking to go eat with the pandemic thing going on?
When it's all over, when things are back to normal, where will be the first place Arn can't wait to go?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. We have a steakhouse here called Beef and Bottle that has been in Charlotte probably 50 years. That is really old school. Just it's not real fancy. It's not white tablecloth. You can wear whatever you'd like in there, but the steaks are phenomenal. All the sides are incredible. It's just a really good your kind of steak, 16 ounce, 20 ounce, really good stuff. And I look forward to going in there and grabbing a meal.
Yeah, I just had to throw that in my Google machine, and I wish they were open today.
Check.
This is a fun one because so many of our listeners really hang on your every word with some of your old promos. Do you have a favorite promo that you've done yourself? Like, is there one that, you look back and say, man, that's about as good as I ever did right there?
There's probably three that stand out. I think probably retirement, because that wasn't a promo. That was just me saying goodbye.
The My Spot, or is that a different one?
No, the one where I actually retired and made Kurt Hennig, gave him my spot.
Gotcha.
That one. Not the parody that followed.
Right.
Obviously. That one, probably the one from Disney after we got beat up, and myself and Rick and Sting and Ray were in the ambulance and carted off, and the next week we beat up the Boogeyman. That promo, which is the one that you brought up, the quote that I stole from the Untouchables. You take one of ours to the hospital, we take one of yours to the morgue.
Yep.
That promo, and I would think probably Greenville, when we're out in Greenville in the tuxes and stuff, and it was Rick's return to the company. I think those three probably stand out.
What about a favorite promo from someone else? You know, one of the more famous promos that people talk about are Dusty Rhodes' Hard Times and CM Punk's Pipe Bomb. Is there one that sticks out to you that maybe a lot of people aren't talking about, that you think, man, that guy was on top of his game right there?
No one in particular that is just stuck in my mind, I don't think. I know that when I was down in Pensacola, Bob Armstrong had a very convincing promo. And it was just a Southern firefighter that was now a wrestler and was just a tough son of a bitch. And he could talk that Southern stuff that you and I understand, Conrad, and the audience would just get behind him and they would believe in him. And if he told you payback was coming, you believed it. And he was one of the guys that I really loved to watch talk. You know, obviously Dusty never did a bad interview, I don't think, in his life. Paul Ellering used to entertain me a lot, putting the Road Warriors over.
How competitive was it when you guys were in the Horsemen? You know, Ole was known to be a strong promo. You obviously as well. Tully Blanchard could get heat like almost nobody else. And Ric Flair's promos at times were just out of this world. It almost felt like you guys were competitive with each other. Maybe it wasn't spoken or explicitly said, but you don't want to go out there if everybody else is shining like a diamond and come off looking like a turd. You got to bring your A game. Was there some competitiveness of, man, let's see if they can top this?
You know, and this is what's funny. We would never talk about who was going to go first or last or anywhere in the middle. It was just kind of working knowledge that we knew who had the big match. If Tully and I were going to be third match on that particular interview, we would just lay out. If Rick, was always going to be the main event, we would let him either take the lead, step up. You knew once the microphone was ready to be handed off from Shivani, whoever stepped forward and took it, you knew we're going to lead off. And if it made the rounds and there was still a little bit of time left, I would try to go second because I was selfish. I want to make sure I had enough time to get over. And I know that sounds selfish, but if you go at the very end and the promo has flowed so well that it should probably end with the guy that's ending right now, that last guy would just lay out and JJ would lean forward and put the 4 out, and we'd all throw in 4 fingers and we were done. And it was almost just knowing, okay, this one has flowed well, don't need to say anything else. But if you were wanting to talk and you only had 15 seconds left, you better have just one kill shot line, one Clint Eastwood line or something to shut it down with, because that's all you had. And you did not want to go over on that TV show because that time did not belong to you and it was very valuable.
Let's talk about those 4 fingers. Brad writes, how hard was it to not put up the 4 Horsemen 4 fingers hand gesture when you and Tully went to the WWF and all the fans were doing it back to you?
Well, the very first night, and we did it probably without thinking, they did hit us with it our very first time on TV, and without thinking, we shot it back to them. And when we came through the curtain, we were told, do not do that. That was then. This is now. It has nothing to do with the Four Horsemen. You guys are in a different company or different characters. And they only had to tell us once.
This is an interesting question, and one that's been debated a lot. And I think you and I have touched on it a little bit, but I don't think you gave your opinion. Chip wants to know, does Arn thinking that this pandemic will be the final nail in the coffin for the house show business? There's been a lot of speculation that on the other side of this, wrestling really will become a television product. And if there's a TV taping, then there will be matches. But if there's not, house shows, no mas. What say you?
I don't believe that, because house shows are different than television. It's a different show. And I think people are still going to need entertainment. And when it comes to your town, I mean, you can watch anything on TV. Doesn't matter what it is. But, if Cirque du Soleil comes to town, I'm going to go see it.
Right.
Because it's such a quality entertainment event. And they did come to Concord, Cabarrus years ago, and took the family and went up there. And it's just a different viewing experience than sitting watching on TV. Same thing with a live event. It's a lot of fun. It's different. You don't have the glitz and glamour and the pyro and all that stuff, but you get, 8 matches or something, and you get a short story where the beginning, a middle, and an end, and you get winners and losers, and it's just a different viewing experience than TV. And I think as long as, and once America gets back thumping and hitting on 4 cylinders, and people are out making money and spending money, people still want to have entertainment. And I think there will still be some house shows around.
Let's do a question about Jim Cornette. It feels like we've gotten a lot of questions about stories that maybe Corny has told on his podcast about you, but here's a fun one. Chip wants to know, can you give us any stories or recollections of your time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling? Some of our younger fans may not be familiar with this territory, but this was what Jim Cornette started after he left WCW and the NWA. He started his own promotion, and it had quite the little run. It was sort of its own little territory before ECW rose to prominence, and it was sort of the it place to be if you weren't with the WWF and WCW, and you had a few shots there. And I think it was mostly on like a talent trade from WCW, if I recall. What can you tell us about your time in Smoky Mountain?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it really was fun. And I think this occurred after I did the angle with Eric Watts, and he blew my knee out in the 7-Eleven parking lot. We had to fight, and I went home for a few months, and Bobby was off too. And we worked about 3 shots for Corny, and he did the promo where Ricky and Robert brought out a mystery partner under a sheet.
Yeah.
And man, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this whole shooting match because Cornette played it off so well. I mean, he came over and, looked at me, and I don't know, I think he kind of made a half-ass kick at the bottom of the sheet and insulted whoever was under the sheet, and there's nobody under there. And I don't think anybody on earth would have believed or guessed I was going to be partners with Ricky and Robert after all we had been through over the years. And it was just when he pulled that sheet off of me, that place blew up, and we had a hell of a fight, and we worked our way into, a match coming up, a couple of matches that did some good business for Corny, and he was very generous and in the payoffs, and it was drivable from Charlotte on top of that. So all in all, it was a great time. I had a blast.
All right, let's wrap it up with an interesting question that you and I have never talked about, but I think I know the answer. A wrestling historian writes, why wasn't Ole Anderson inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2012 with the rest of the Horsemen?
Well, my knowledge of what I've heard through the grapevine is Ole does not want anything to do with WWE in any fashion, period. And whether or not he was asked to be part of that group or not, I don't know. If he would have, I'm sure he would not have accepted because of all the things that went down years prior when Vince got control of his television and all those things went down, which is pretty common knowledge in the business. And it was really a heated issue between the two of them, and there was some conversations and insults that went back and forth, and that was probably the biggest reason there was no interest on either one's part.
Did you ever hear the story? I just need you to sort of confirm or deny that once upon a time, Vince McMahon went down to Atlanta and he brought his wife Linda with him. He goes over to Ole and says, Ole, I want to introduce you to someone. This is my wife, Linda. Allegedly, Ole says, fuck you and fuck her too.
I would, if I was just guessing, I would say that probably happened.
It's unbelievable, man. It's just, Ole was a character and a half. And, I don't know, if you want to be entertained and you're not familiar with how sort of ornery Ole Anderson could be, throw it in your YouTube machine because, man, that guy just wakes up pissed off, does he not?
Yes, he does. And he's always been kind of that way, but not to the extent it is now. He was very intimidating and he was easy on me, but he was very intimidating, very gruff. And in those days, I guess you have to be fair about it. When Vince was going around and putting his plan in place to take over pretty much the world, these promoters and these owners took that personally.
Sure.
And it was a guy taking away their livelihood. And you could imagine if, it doesn't matter what company it is, if a big brand new company comes in that's a hardware store or whatever, and Home Depot and all these other guys have been around for a while, but this one is just a mega store and got all these things, and they're going to look at putting you out of business, that would be a sore subject with you. And I think a lot of that stems from a lot of promoters back in the day when the takeover was in its infancy.
Talk to me briefly about Ole and Rick. Allegedly over the years when Ole was booker and in control, he wasn't always a fan of the style of match or the performances that Rick put together. And he's been pretty critical in shoot interviews in more recent years. And he even alleges that, quote unquote, I put the goddamn belt on him so you just fucking leave. He's tired of seeing these same matches over and over. And the idea is he was upset that Rick would quote unquote go long for the sake of going long. The idea that Rick thought a good match meant a long match. So he wanted him to go, quote unquote, go home, get in the showers and get to the next fucking town. And it just feels like that is a source of frustration for Ole where, maybe that wasn't even the real reason he was upset, but he's just looking for a reason to be mad at Rick. What was their relationship like and when did it start to sour?
Well, I would just guess that when Rick was making the rounds as the world champion, Ole wouldn't see him live wrestling very much because he was traveling the world.
Right.
And he would come back to his territory and make his dates. And there he would go. He would go to Puerto Rico or Australia or, wherever it was going to be, other places in the States, he'd go to Portland for a week. He'd go to Pensacola for a week. He'd go to Dallas for a week. He'd go to Kansas City for a week. And Ole really wasn't watching him work that much. But when Ole started back working and he and I were partners and the Horsemen thing came around and he was at the arena every night watching Rick in those long matches, I think that is probably where it would start to grate on him a little bit. Don't know why, but I know this, and it's something nobody probably ever thought about. Ole and I would have our match, let's just say, whenever it was, whenever we were on, first match after intermission, semi-main, depending on where Tully was on the card and all these other things, but we would notoriously have to be there to the very end to run in on Rick's match. And, after his match or whatever. So now if you're doing 50 minutes and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting for a guy like Ole, who was already a wealthy man and already had his money put up and had his life pretty much settled, now this is just guessing, that might have grated on him, the long matches and all those things. But I'm not sure, not positive. That's just my guess.
Well, I'm positive that we'll be back next week. We're going to be visiting Over the Limit 2010. It's a WWE pay-per-view that went down in Detroit on May 23rd. On top, it's John Cena and Batista in an I Quit match. We've got Eve Torres and Maurice for the Divas title. We've got Big Show and Jack Swagger for the World Heavyweight title. We've got Edge and Randy Orton in a singles match. We've got the Hart Dynasty, which we haven't spent a ton of time talking about, but it's David Hart Smith and Tyson Kidd taking on Chris Jericho and The Miz for the Tag Team Championship. Rey Mysterio and CM Punk in a Straight Edge Society pledge versus a hair match. And then R-Truth will be with DiBiase, Kofi Kingston, and Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental Championship. So these days, those are world title guys. Here, they're wrestling for the IC. That's what you can expect next week on Arn. If you've got a question about that show, or you want to participate in our next Ask Arn Anything, follow us on Twitter. It's at The Arn Show. Until next week, he is at The Arn Show. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you right here on Westwood One each and every Tuesday. It's Arn! Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.